Lehohla is about to release a report that could shed more light on the financial state of health of South African universities. The report provides various financial statistics of South Africa's public higher education institutions for last year. It will include things such as tuition fees, government grants, details of staff salaries and the other expenses of tertiary institutions. It comes as fees must fall protests underpinned by a demand for free university education continues across the country. Let's take you live to that briefing in Parliament.
Education institution comes in the context of many interesting developments in the country. Amongst them, the hashtag fees must fall. So I think it's attracting attention of society. So what are the sources of the information? It's not only information from the higher education information, but we look at household surveys as the impact on, or rather information from household surveys, which looks at households in relation to higher education, price statistics such as consumer price index, population, because people who go attend universities are from the population, and of course education is largely financed by government, and of course to look at education in the context of national accounts. So what are the concepts that we have to understand in relation to this? We are looking at this from January 1st to 31st December, that's the context, and it's about audited financial statements, looking at receipts, which is actual cash received, looking at tuition, and then of course tuition being fees that are paid, and then of course donations that universities do receive. There are payments, which is a compensation of employees, the goods and services that the university applies, and then capital expenditure. We are looking at the 26 higher education institutions in South Africa, 20 of them being universities and 6 being universities of technology. And of course, we exclude private institutions. We look at this data in a time series perspective over 10 years, 2006 to 2015, to give perspective, not just looking at one point, but to give perspective. And of course, a unit record information is available. And this is part and parcel of consolidated financials. And of course, these are adjusted from accrual to cash for consolidation purposes. Now, here is where our universities are in the Eastern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Western Cape, and then of course we have one now in the Northern Cape, in the Free State. So each province is represented here, but I may not say well represented, but each province is represented in terms of its institution. And those that are labeled with brown are universities of technology, and then the other ones are universities. Enrollment in higher education, we can see it has been growing from about 2006, from 742,000 to almost 1 million today. Contribution of first year students, it's about 171,000, which is 17.5% of the school student roll, and the other students are around that 82.5%. This is as of 2015. We haven't looked at 2016 yet. But we are making this point about 171,000 students and in 938,000, in almost 1 million. And the point we want to make is the following. If there are 171,000 students and 90% of them are in the first, second, and third year, and 10% in masters and postgraduate and all that, what you would expect is that you have in the region of 500,000 students plus another 100,000 students who should be, or 60,000 students who should be in your masters and postgraduate and doctorate, which gives you about a maximum of 600,000 students. We have 1 million. And I think we need to grasp that issue, that if the input into the system is 171,000, and the program is 3 years. You multiply 3 years by 171,000. It will give you about 500,000. Add the master's plus doctorate is 60,000. It will give you 560,000. We have 1 million students. Now, and what's going to happen, as we no doubt we see in this graph, that the number of students by race, that right metric, that's white, and that gives you proportions that are in the white, the progression from about 19, or rather when you go into the population, you ask whether you have grade 12, you have these are the proportion amongst whites, this is the proportion amongst Indians, and you can see ADS catching up with whites, and then this is black, and increasing a little bit as of 2015, and then the colors. These numbers from blacks, yes, if the pool is there, if they pass well, universities will continue to receive a number of people. Amongst whites, not so much, because the population numbers are not growing and the youth is almost steady. That number wouldn't, it's not one that will fit. So amongst Indians a little bit, because fertility there has dropped, number of children that are born have dropped. Here there is still pools of people that can still go into university. So the pool that goes into university is likely to increase. Now, this is what is happening at university by race. And this gives you an image of what has been happening at universities. If the graph goes this way, it means progressively smaller and smaller proportion of those who go to university is a decreasing proportion of success. When it goes that way, it means there is an increasing proportion of those who succeed. So amongst whites and Indians, that's what he's saying, and amongst black and colors, that's what this is saying. And the context that we are talking about is where we should be probably having 560,000 students in universities, we have 1 million. It means that we have another number that is just treadmilling at the same point. Because if the input is 170,000 and the number of years that you stay at university is 3, if all the students that come in pass, then at any given time you must have 560,000 students. We have 1 million. So, now this is how the distribution of numbers are. Of course, UNISA as a correspondence university has a third of that at 337,000. And then Northwest 64,000, and we go up to Solplage, which has only 328,000. And then of growth in student numbers, we see across that 10-year period, Northwest grew by 65%. On average, the institutions have grown by 32%. All institutions. And those that are below that is Stellenbosch, Cape Town, and so on, below the 32%, but very close to the 32%. And then, of course, Val, which is growing only at 2.9. Northwest has grown quite dramatically, and Zululand and Forte. Now we look at what has been received and what has been paid. The grants, tuition is 34%, grants from government 42%, and other receipts is 23%, coming up to 63 billion. What has been spent, it's other payments, here 54 billion, compensation to employees, 58%. Of course, universities are labor intensive, because you have to have lecturers that teach, and goods on services at 35%. So there's those payments, 54 billion. If we look at these composition of these receipts, is grants across time, and tuition, and of course other receipts. So grants, which largely come from government, have grown by about 7 billion, from 19 to 26 billion over a period of 5 years. Tuition from almost doubled, that the amount of money paid by students has grown by about 9 billion, from 12 to 21 billion, while other receipts have really stayed almost the same, increasing only by $1 billion over time. Now, tuition fees that are received by a high school, your institution of higher learning, UNISA leads the chart. It has 338. It has a third of the student body. It has 3 billion, and then Pretoria University 2 billion, VETS 1.7, and then of course Sol Plaatje 15 million rands. Now, what is the tuition as a percentage of higher learning on average? Tuition as that is school fees as a percentage, we have already seen that, it's at 34%. And at UNISA, it's much higher than 34%, above the average, almost 50%. Rhodes, 43%. Sefako Makgatho, 25%. University of Pretoria, amongst the older universities, has 32%. Stellenbosch and Western Cape, 28%. So tuition, that is school fees, particularly in an older university like Stellenbosch, is not a big component of the resources that the university gets. Grants received, here we see VETS being highest on the grants, and it's highest on the grants because it had to carry on the burden, or rather the responsibility for the institution in Mpumalanga. And then, of course, Pretoria University, and these are the grants received, with Mangosuthu receiving the lowest at 284 million. What are the main contributors to grants received by higher education? We see VETS, and we can see the increase from 1.6 to 2.2. There is a consequence of VETS having responsibility over the university in Mpumalanga, and these are the rates, or rather the amounts of grants that were received in billions. Now, the relative contribution of these grants from national government to universities, as far as universities of technology, these have remained flat, and they have increased relatively to universities from 8 to 22 billion, giving it a difference of about 14 billion in between 2006 and then donations have been 4 billion, and Stellenbosch actually leading the pack with almost a quarter of that 4 billion, followed by KwaZulu-Natal, and then the others getting a share, 449 for University of Cape Town, Nelson Mandela 374. And then donations as well have moved in the direction of universities and universities of technology getting a smaller fraction of these donations. What about payments? Compensation to employees, we said, is 58%, and 31 billion goes to employees, 3.9 going at UNISA, 2.6 Pretoria, Cape Town 2.8, 2.4, and Sol Plaatje at 38 million, and the others falling in between. Bursaries, which come in at 3.1 billion. We've got grants, we've got 22 billion, bursaries at 3 billion that universities give to students, and these are distributed in $500 million in University of Cape Town, 403 Stellenbosch, KwaZulu-Natal 315, and Fort Hare at 5 million in terms of bursaries granted to students. Capital expenditure, universities have to reconstruct and build, and we can see that capital expenditure coming in at University of Witwatersrand as a consequence of providing construction in Mpumalanga. Stellenbosch 714, there is Sol Plaatje 644, and Zululand 32 million. All in all, the capital expenditure spent in this higher institution coming at 7.2 billion. Here we are looking at a statement of sources and uses of cash. What has been received minus payments the net cash flow from investments in non-financial assets, surplus, there you'll see why we put A there and why we put B there, and then we come in and create a new variable called C, which is A plus B, which is surplus before net financing of activities. So is that amount, it's A there, it's B, and then we've got a new variable C, and now we look at the net cash flow from financing, which brings a new variable called D, and then of course we look at the changes in the stocks by adding C plus D. So we have here superscript 1 and superscript 2, which is one is an inflow because it's receiving, and then the other one is outflow because it's outgoing. So given this situation, what we see here is what the surplus before net financing of activities, which we talked about there, C, we can see that Pretoria University has quite a positive balance, so is VETS, and the other universities have a bit of a negative balance, which and the net surplus is 2 billion. Looking at what the net change in the stocks of cash, here we see Pretoria University still standing a little bit strong, followed by Cape Town, and then the other universities having a negative net change in the stocks. Don't worry, my colleagues on the sides here will explain those things that I've just spoken to. Now, we know that the president said that in 2016 there was not going to be any increase in fees. Therefore, higher education increase in terms of inflation will be zero. We can see that this is headline inflation, and therefore, as we measure it, that will be zero. We can see that across time, the higher education was above inflation. Its increases were above inflation. That's tertiary education. Inflation was at about 6, picking up a little bit there, and of course here tertiary education 3 percentage points above inflation, and 9.8% tertiary education, but by year 2016 it will be zero. But of course we know next year increases have been set not to exceed 8%. What is the annual percentage change in household expenditure on education? These are the kinds of spent by household in all education, not only higher education. But we can see that that has been coming down relative to other expenditures from 12 to about 9.4 by 2015. Now, in terms of where the spend is, 92% is in schools, and that has been consistent. Universities, that has increased a bit, up to 5%. Colleges, 1%, and other institutions, 1%. That making the average overall amount of schools taking 93%, universities and University of Technology about 5% of the total budget of the country, and then colleges 1% and others 1%. What are the closing remarks then? Our closing remarks are that school enrollment in higher education grew by 32% from 2006 to 2015. So that's the enrollment. It grew from 700,000 to almost 1 million by 2015. First-year students are the input into the system, and there are about 170,000 of them as of 2015. Before 2015, there were fewer, but assuming that there are 170, or rather not assuming that 171 going forward will be the number, one would have expect if the throughput is successful, you would expect no more than 600,000 students, including those with doctorate, the pursued doctorate and so on, if people don't fail or repeat and those kinds of things. we have 1 million. So we have about 400,000 more students in the system that are, I wouldn't like to say clogging the system, but the system would have about 600,000 students at most, but it has 1 million, given the input into the system. Well, grants by national government increased by 144% over this 10-year period, when student roll increased by 32.8%. So there must have been a lot of backlog being tackled in the process. Salaries, universities are labor intensive, or the labor of the mind, which is the brain, 58%, and of the total current expenditure over the last 10 years. It's been consistent. On average, income from tuition fees increased by 12% per annum, well above inflation from 2006 to 2015. So it's 6%, 6 percentage points above inflation. That is tuition. And annual rise in tuition for tertiary education was 9.8%. And of course, as I said, in 2016, there's no expectation of an increase in salary. It was frozen. But it will be set at no more than 8% next year. And of course, students went on rampage. They said no free education now. And of course, our report provides only cash transactions, and of course, taken out of annual statements from institutions of higher learning. These are our closing remarks. I brought these two gentlemen from Gauteng. They must answer questions. I made my presentation. They can't come all the way and not answer questions. That's my say. Thanks.
Thanks, SG. As you all know, we are talking to the converted, meaning when you ask your question, your name, your media house. And the other thing is we are connected to Pretoria. I nearly said Cape Town. We are connected to Pretoria. Colleagues in Pretoria, are you ready? Is there anyone in Pretoria? Yes?
Yes, before we maybe take questions in Pretoria, I think it's only fair that we also introduce the panel in Pretoria. We have DDG Jody Beer for Economic Statistics, Ms. Elizabeth Makafula, Director for National and Provincial Institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll start in Cape Town with the first round of questions. Do you have any questions in Cape Town? Going once, twice, gone. Then we move to Pretoria. Pretoria, do you have any questions on the presentation made by the SG?
Yes, there is one hand.
Okay, fire on.
Noted, so you can go ahead.
You can go ahead.
Mbongani Nkosi from the Sowetan. Dr. Lehohla, based on your previous comments that universities or South Africa is actually not producing enough black and colored students, what do you make then of the call for fees to fall? Do you think that is just what we need to open access and be able to produce more black graduates and colored?
The next question.
Barry Bateman, you noted.
Good afternoon, Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News. SG, I'm going to ask the question that the whole country is asking. If we look at these numbers and we see enrollments are going up, grants are going up, tuition fees are going up as well, and there is this demand for no fee increases, what is the solution then, given your studying of these figures, to the impasse that we're currently sitting with in higher education in this country?
Will that be all, Felicia?
Is there no further questions in Pretoria?
Okay. I'll allow SG and the panel to respond to the two questions.
No, I thought that there is a panel in Pretoria. It must answer questions from Pretoria. We'll answer questions from Cape Town. And because we don't have questions from Cape Town, we are not going to answer any questions. Look, the issue is very complex. I think one observation we should make is that the student body, student roll has increased. But the system is inefficient. I mean, if you look at the number of students that enroll at first year, that's your base. And they can't increase subsequent years because some of the students will die and others will fail. So you will look at a decremental table going forward. Therefore, what to expect in the system as it stands in terms of what you put in, you don't expect more than 500,000 3-year students, because at each year you expect a maximum of 170 students, 20,000 students. So that should give you how many? 400, at most 421 students. That's what 521 students, 21,000 students. That's what we expect there. And then we have a master's and doctoral students. You add another 60,000. That's about 580,000. But the truth of the matter is we have 1 million students.